Bring in criminal defense attorney Sarah Becker. As Sarah, on one hand, it's heartbreaking and you feel for her and you feel for the family. And then by looking at it on the other hand, she never knew this baby. They didn't even know that she was pregnant. So I can certainly see both sides. It's our job to see both sides here. I want to get your take on this. You've been through so many cases with clients, and I mean, I've spent a lot of time in the courtroom myself and heard lots of victim impact statements that, I mean, send chills up your spine, make you cry tears. This one, I can really see from both angles here how some people might look at that and say, well, you didn't even know there wasn't a relationship ever formed, but yet it's still a very sad, tragic situation. Your thoughts, please.
Yeah, it struck me as something that had to be done by the prosecution. They had to give her time in court, and they did that. And we don't want to minimize the value of this life to her, even though she didn't know it. But I agree with you that it's not one of the most moving or the most impactful that I've heard. It also really probably didn't have much purpose. I think that it was pretty clearly laid out in the law what the judge could and couldn't do in terms of sentencing.
Sure, good point. How about the defense team? I want to talk about them. I was very impressed with them from an advocacy standpoint. I feel like they really saved her life in this case by putting forth a defense that was so good. And they had a clear legal theory all along, which you and I talked earlier on this Court TV live show about how the prosecution did not. And I think that went to their detriment by throwing out the various legal theories about baby being burned, squeezing the baby too hard, baby drowning, all this, where the defense was consistent all along and said she didn't know she was pregnant till that doctor's appointment. We know she didn't get prenatal care, but that doesn't matter. That can't go to any of the charges or the elements. But it was a stillborn baby. That baby was not born alive, and she gave it a dignified burial. It's like they kept that consistent story and then supported it with all that expert testimony, the false confession expert. I thought they did a beautiful job. What did you think?
I absolutely, excuse me, I absolutely agree. They stuck to their story. Not only they stick to it, but they supported it. And I don't think it should be overlooked how hard it is to find experts of that nature, to pay for them, convince the family to finance it, and really put forward a strong and cohesive case.
Most definitely. I think that they really did a fine job with her, and I hope, I guess to kind of put a bow on it as we wrap this case up in our coverage today, I really hope that part of this probationary period, and I didn't really hear it from the judge in the sentencing, and I don't know what goes on with their probation department in that jurisdiction in Ohio, but I would hope that there is a mental health evaluation done of her now at the present time, and that she is ordered to comply with any treatment. I know where I practice in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, the county that encompassed us was Allegheny County, second largest county in PA, and we were fortunate enough to have a mental health court there, a specialized court, like a docket, if you will, where anytime there was a defendant with mental health difficulties, the case would get tracked there. And only certain types of cases could go there. You know, but here you're talking about her own child who is the victim, so to speak, and suffering from anorexia, bulimia, all that. And I keep thinking how I wonder if they had an equivalent in Ohio, if it perhaps would have gone there with a plea offer. I know they didn't make her a very enticing offer. They offered to get rid of the aggravated murder, but would you have, if that was your client, would you have said plead to the involuntary and...
Probably
let the court
not.
sentence you.
Given the evidence the state didn't have in this case, I think you'd be hard pressed to take that kind of plea.
I gotcha. And any final thoughts? What do you think, Sarah, to kind of just wrap it up? Final thoughts on this and the sentence that was given to her, and what you hope to see happen with her?
You know, obviously we hope that she gets a probation officer who kind of works in her interest in that way, checks in on her, tries to offer her resources in terms of dealing with what's sure to be the ongoing consequences of this whole ordeal.
Right. Well, that's certainly, it was a fascinating case, and I'm so glad we had you here to help us break that down. And to switch gears, I want you to now think about this Mullis case happening in Iowa. If you haven't heard about this one is a doozy. It's bizarre to say the least. The defendant is the husband of the victim. He says it was an accident that his wife fell on a corn rake. I didn't know what one was, what one looked like. I've never spent any time on a farm, and it kind of looks like a pitchfork just with curved prongs on it. Tell me your thoughts as far as what the state needs to do to prove that this was a murder with that tool and what the defense needs to do if they're going to come forward, and we know they've got a couple people listed as witnesses, so my gut tells me they're going to present something to support the accident theory. How do you think both sides combat this case?
You know, I think the state needs to point to these circumstantial facts and how they exclude any other reasonable theory except that he killed his wife. That's what you've got to do with the circumstantial case, right? And the defense, the main thing that I see is they're going to have to find a way to mitigate the facts regarding the affair that she was having, because those certainly lead to a presumption or an assumption that maybe there was distress in the marriage. And they're also going to have to explain the puncture wounds and why they're at different angles and why there are 6 as opposed to the 4 that are present, the 4 prongs that are present on that rake.
Mm-hmm. From the reading that I've been able to do, our wonderful Court TV research team looked into what some potential witnesses are going to say in this trial, and some of them that knew Amy, knew she was unhappy in the marriage, having affairs. Todd knew about it, was very jealous, very upset, and she was afraid to leave him, is what I understand. And this case, just when I look at it on its face, I keep thinking domestic violence all day long. Are you seeing any of that just on the face, what we know so far? And again, just the facts we're presented with.
I don't see enough at this point to push me in that direction, but it's certainly witnesses that I'd like to see from both sides regarding whether or not those circumstances were in play.
I know that there was a close friend of Amy's, possibly will be called as a witness, who said that knew that she was unfaithful, but Amy feared Todd would kill her for the cheating. And this friend told investigators in this case that Todd was very jealous, very possessive, would frequently text her to know where she was, when she was coming back. Said that Amy was so sure that he would kill her, she told her friend that if she went missing, to look for her remains on a wooded property the couple had recently purchased. And when I read that, I thought, this is really chilling. And why I say domestic violence, it's that power and control dynamic I know to be present in those kinds of cases, where if there is a batterer, and who knows, maybe there was no physical violence, but there can still be that dynamic of the power and the control going on. And if there was infidelity, that trying to keep a close watch on her. And I think money may be a motivator as well. Like you mentioned, the affairs, Sarah, right? That could be a motivator. And then also the fact that he could stand to lose lots of money if there was a divorce because of their arrangement and whatnot. So if I'm the prosecutor, I'm thinking I'm going to go with, use both of those facts as potential motivators. What do you say?
Well, I think it's interesting. Certainly, that's the kind of evidence that they would want to put forward to kind of shore up this circumstantial case. I do think it's interesting. I think that we heard Ted say earlier that they anticipated the defense calling some character witnesses. And if that's the case, that's going to be interesting, because certainly the state would be entitled to ask them about these kind of damning circumstances of the marriage. And I'd, as a defense attorney, want to put forward somebody who could oppose those opinions. And I'd also want some of those character witnesses to be talking about what kind of father he is and whether or not he was the kind of father who would want his 13-year-old son to discover his mother on the ground with a pitchfork in his back, because I think they could be very helpful to the defense if they were able to call people to say he loved his son, he cared about his son. It's not the kind of thing he would have ever done.
Right, absolutely. You make a great point there. Sarah Becker, always great to see you. Thank you so much for sharing your legal expertise with us here on Court TV Live. We've got to take a quick break right now. When we come back, my colleague Seema Iyer will be joining me here in the studio. Don't go away.